The film places us at the end of 2004, introducing us to Louis Schaller, a man who is heading home on London's last night train before the Christmas holidays. He is dozing off, and he has every reason to be tired. Not only is he a dedicated doctor, but since the death of his wife, he has had to care for his young son, Max, all on his own. During the journey, the boy plays with his toy dinosaur and holds it up to his father's face. Far from being annoyed by this interruption of his longed-for rest, Louis plays along with his son. After a few seconds, he receives a phone call from work asking for some guidance in treating a patient. While attending to the case, in another carriage, he notices his son talking to a newly arrived seatmate. Louis pays it no mind until Max accidentally spills the woman's coffee on her coat. He immediately returns to his seat and apologizes on his son's behalf. The woman, who introduces herself as Sarah, is not bothered at all and understands that these are just children's antics. During the trip, Louis informs his son that he is needed at the hospital, so he will take him to his grandparents as soon as they arrive at their destination. Even though Max is tired of hearing excuses like this, Sarah finds Louis's attitude towards him touching and can't help but get involved in the conversation. The man prefers to speak modestly about himself, while his son proudly claims that he can diagnose people's ailments just by looking at them. Discreetly, Louis winks at the boy, thanking him for praising him in front of Sarah. However, his hopes are dashed when he hears her on the phone, seemingly talking to her partner. Meanwhile, Max glances toward the back of the carriage and spots a man named Jan performing a magic trick for him, though it also scares him a bit. At the next stop, the protagonist notices a passenger acting suspiciously, although he is soon distracted when he realizes Sarah is gone without even saying goodbye. Nevertheless, upon waking from a short nap, he finds her again by his side. It turns out she only stepped out to buy a new coat. Both realize that they are now the last ones on board in their carriage. Given the circumstances, they start to get to know each other more deeply. She reveals that she broke up with her boyfriend a month ago and that tonight her friends encouraged her to go out partying as a consolation. That explains why she was talking about her appearance on the phone. The train suddenly stops in the middle of nowhere. Looking out the window, he sees a man approaching the brakes. When the train resumes its journey, he glimpses another man crawling along the tracks as if he were injured. Alarmed, Louis heads to the driver's cab until another passenger, a businessman named Carl Michael, stops him, asking what happened. After hearing Louis's account, Carl suggests calling an ambulance to pick up the injured man instead of bothering the conductor. Later, as the train approaches the station where Louis intends to get off with his son, Sarah dares to say goodbye with a kiss and reminds him that he has her number. However, the man barely reacts because he realizes the train passes straight through his stop. Intrigued, he leaves his son in Sarah's care and that of an elderly passenger named Elaine. Then he tries to speak with the conductor via the intercom. The conductor responds only to ask how many passengers remain on board. Growing impatient, Louis bangs on the conductor's cab. When this has no effect, he starts pulling various emergency brakes in the carriages with Carl Michael's help, but nothing happens. During this process, they run into John, whose reflective vest is similar to the one worn by the man Louis saw tampering with the brakes. This raises their suspicions about John, who defends himself by claiming he wears this vest because he works on the London Underground. Thus, the group heads to the rear cab and engages the handbrake. It works at first, but then the conductor speeds up again to max. Since it's a diesel-powered train, the police cannot stop it from the outside by cutting electricity. By this point, the group concludes that the conductor wants to kill himself and drag the passengers along with him. Overwhelmed, the protagonist tries to hide the delicate situation from his son. However, Max has inherited his father's keen perception and soon realizes the train cannot stop. This increases Louis's anxiety, who demands the boy stop talking and stay seated. Due to the child's reaction, Sarah sits next to him and tries to calm him down. Moved by this, Louis apologizes to his son. As they pass the last station on the route, Louis sees the police outside, who cannot do much for them. Therefore, he starts playing Simon Says with his son. Simon Says, lean forward, hands behind your head, and close your eyes. This is how he prepares him for an imminent impact without telling him directly. As the train continues forward, it plows into a car full of college students crossing at a level crossing. While for the passengers, it was just a small jolt. The car was left in pieces. Knowing it's only a matter of time before they meet a similar fate, Elaine suffers a sudden cardiac arrest. Unfortunately, the doctor's resuscitation techniques are not enough to save her. Jan helps him come to terms with this and asks for his support in a plan that might save them all, forcefully opening the conductor's cab. Armed with a fire extinguisher and a makeshift battering ram, they manage to break the glass of the door after many tries. As Lewis climbs through the opening, he finds the body of the original conductor. When he peeks into the imposter's cab, he sees a black helmet, the same one worn by the suspicious passenger he saw before. Desperate, the doctor bangs on the door and tries to reason with him with words. Since he gets no response, he resorts to violence, hitting the door with the fire extinguisher. Unfortunately, this second door is much more reinforced and barely gets scratched. Meanwhile, the conductor torments him by constantly sounding the horn. Finally, Lewis collapses, defeated, but Jan extends his hand and encourages him to think of a new plan. Back with the other passengers, the protagonist tells them that their enemy took control of the train while most of them were asleep. According to his theory, the suspect killed the conductor, strangling him, and when another railway worker discovered the crime, that worker activated the emergency brakes halfway through the route. Unfortunately, the murderer always wanted to be a magician, apart from his official job. He even had a show planned for the next day, one in which he intended to surprise his parents, despite their disapproval of his crazy dream. After a jolt of the train that unnerves Max, Jan calms him down by performing a magic trick, making his cigarette disappear. Sarcastically, the magician remarks that this is why dinosaurs became extinct. The passengers applaud the show and toast him, although their faces soon darken, because they know what he must do. Like Houdini, John always does his own stunts, so he goes outside the train, clinging to the edges as he tries to uncouple the carriages. Easier said than done, since the train is going at 160 km/h, well above its general limit. Because of this, the man starts to slip and calls for Lewis's help. At the same time, Sarah notices they are about to enter a single-track tunnel, meaning it's a terrible idea to remain outside. Just before entering the tunnel, Lewis pulls Jan back into the train, saving him. During the journey, they feel the train slow down, thanks to a blockade of sandbags placed by the police. Of course, a tunnel is the worst possible place due to the extremely tight space. They barely manage to open the door, and the gap is so narrow that no one can pass through unless they are very small. Lewis then asks his son to abandon the train, but the boy runs off through the carriages. When his father catches up to him, the boy breaks down in tears, exclaiming that he does not want to leave him. As they argue, the train overcomes the sandbags and picks up speed again. Now it's truly impossible for anyone to get off. With no other choice, the protagonist embraces his son, while Sarah returns his toy. Just when it seemed they had run out of ideas, Lewis tells the others he has a new plan, suspecting they are about to suffer a fatal accident at Hastings Station's buffers. The doctor improvises an explosive using the last fire extinguisher. The controlled explosion destroys the floor panels near the coupler that separates the carriages from the conductor's cab. The problem is that it's jammed, not to mention the flames all around them. Using the makeshift battering ram, Carl Michael manages to engage the coupler, but unfortunately he falls through the gap between the carriages. The flaming carriages separate as they speed through a suburban station, where police officers watch helplessly. From the forward carriage, Lewis gives Jan and Sarah instructions, and they manage to stop their carriage with the rear handbrake. With the train running out of fuel and surrounded by flames, the protagonist takes a moment to pull himself together. As the train is in fire, he makes a run for it and jumps out. Just when he thought he had crossed into the afterlife, he hears the voice of his son and the other passengers. They have survived. While a police helicopter flies overhead, Lewis looks at the now destroyed train. The conductor's reasons for doing what he did will never be known, but at least the passengers were saved. Moreover, the doctor will still make it tonight, no matter the condition he's in.
If you want interesting movie